Welcome to this video in which I show you how to make this lovely flannel patchwork quilt. The video covers all the steps from cutting up the squares to making the blocks, assembling the quilt sandwich and binding it and finishing it with hand tying. This red line here is 1 inch from the end. So if I put my square here like this and put the red line, which you probably can hardly see, but I've just shown it to you, on the diagonal centre part of the square, and then I've got my rotary cutter and cut there, and that's going to be a 1 triangle. So then if I put my red line on the diagonal across the corner to corner, and cut there, that's my other triangle. And I've got my centerpiece, and these are the bits that I'm going to be mixing and matching with the triangles. Pin the blocks together and then sew them in a row. Press all of the seams and then sew the rows together. Make your quilt sandwich by laying your backing fabric bottom side up onto a flat surface. Next, add your wadding or polyester batting and then your quilt top. Secure all the layers with pins, smoothing out as you go from the centre, and then secure the edges of the quilt by sewing all around the edge. You can either use a straight or zigzag stitch on an ordinary sewing machine, or you can use an overlocker as you see me doing here. Start by placing your binding right sides together at the front of the quilt, about 12 inches from one of the corners. Leave a tail, as you've just seen me showing there, of about 6 inches, and that's for joining up the ends when you've finished. I actually use too much of a seam allowance here. I think it's because I'm using not my normal machine, and I normally use the width of my machine foot as my seam allowance. So I would aim for about 1/2 inch. What you can do is sew a little bit and then look at how much fabric you've got left, taking into account the thickness of your quilt and the fact that you're going to turn it to the back and then turn under the other raw edge and see how it looks. It might be that you only want a small bit of binding showing on the front or more, so you can adjust it accordingly. So sew all the way down one side, and then when you get to the corner, stop 1/2 inch before the end, or whatever the equivalent of whatever seam allowance you allowed. I take the work out at this point. I actually don't back stitch. I know that people normally do, but I don't. Take the quilt from under the foot, snip the threads, and then fold the binding back on itself at a 45-degree angle. Hold it with your thumb, and then get the loose end, and then fold that back along the new edge that you're going to sew on the quilt. So the fold is in line with the edge you've just sewn. And then turn your quilt 90 degrees to the left and put it back under the foot, but start right at the edge. So it's right at the edge of the side you've just sewn, and a 1/2 inch in my case in from the edge that you're about to sew. Put the foot down and the needle in and carry on. Do the same when you get to the next corner. Stop 1/2 inch before the end. Take the work out and trim the threads. Again, fold the binding back on itself 45 degrees. Hold it in place and then fold the loose end back so that it's along the line that you're about to sew, along the edge that you're about to sew. Hold it in place with your hand and then turn the quilt 90 degrees so that you're ready to sew the next edge. Continue sewing until you get back to the beginning. After you've turned the last corner, stop before you get to the end of the piece of binding. Leave a good 4 or 5 inches. I then fold back the loose end at 45 degrees. And then I get the loose end at the start of the binding. I trim it down to size and I put that on top of the folded end. There are other ways of doing this, but this is what I do. I find it works fine for the types of quilts that I'm making. Trim off the excess fabric and place the loose end on top of the folded end, and then continue to sew the layers together. Here I'm just showing you how the drawing will look once you've finished. You'll have a folded over piece of the binding resting on top of the raw edge from when you started, and you can just fold this under along with the binding and fold it under. You can trim the edges a little bit further to remove bulk. Stitch the binding to the back of the quilt by turning it under and hand stitching.